That is an absolute classic, man. One of the best metal intros ever. That is, of course, Deep Purple. And if you haven't guessed it, this is a very special podcast on Deep Purple. This is our debut Shockwaves Skull Session podcast. I am Bob Nalbandian, your host for this podcast, and I'm sure many of you know me from the Shockwaves Hard Radio podcast, which is available on hardradio.com and iTunes, and will continue to be available on hardradio.com. This is a separate podcast entitled the Shockwaves Skull Session, and it is going to be primarily discussions and debates revolving around heavy metal. As many of you may remember on the couple previous episodes back from the Shockwaves Hard Radio podcast, we did a Judas Priest debate that featured Monte Conner and Martin Popoff. And the response to that was just absolutely tremendous. So I've decided to devote a whole new series for this style of discussions and debates. And on this episode, we got, once again, Martin Popoff and Monte Conner discussing the Deep Purple catalog this time around. So we're going to go ahead and get right into it because this is quite a long podcast. So kick back, relax, crack open a beer, and enjoy this one, man, because this is a damn good debate. But before we do get started on it, I want to let you know, for more information, you could go to roadrunnerrecords.com, and on that site there should be information about the Shockwaves Skull Session and the website and everything that is being put together as I speak. But in the meantime, you could hit me up at shockwaveskullsession@gmail.com. That is, once again, Shockwaves Skull Session, all one word, at gmail.com. And I tell you, we got lots of great upcoming episodes, some great discussions coming up. Our next episode is going to be a great discussion about Slayer, the early days of Slayer, with book author Joel MacGyver, who has just released, or will be soon releasing, I believe in next month in June, The Bloody Reign of Slayer, the first major book on Slayer, which will be released on Omnibus Press worldwide. So that will be our next podcast. It will be a three-way discussion with Joel MacGyver and Doug Goodman. Doug was Slayer's very first tour manager, and he shares some incredible stories about the old days of Slayer. So you definitely want to check that one out. That'll be our next podcast, followed by a great debate on Kiss, and that is between Monte Conner and Marty Friedman. That's right, Marty Friedman heard the Judas Priest debate on the Shockwaves Hard Radio podcast and was so impressed, he emailed me and said, dude, you got to do one on Kiss and I want to be involved. So, hey, we did it and it's awesome. That'll be coming up. I also have a great podcast discussion that'll be coming up with Doug Pinnick from King's X and Monty Colvin from Galactic Cowboys, now in the new band Crunchy. That's a great discussion regarding the Texas metal scene, and they both share some great stories. So got a lot of great stuff coming up, and many other episodes that I will tell you about at a later date. But right now we're going to get right into the great Deep Purple debate.
We got Monte Conner live in New York, and as everyone should know, Monte Conner is the head of A&R at Roadrunner Records in New York, and we've got the famous author-journalist Martin Popoff in Toronto, Canada. You probably recognize his work in Brave Words and Bloody Knuckles. He's also written several books you could check out on martinpopoff.com, and you could check out his writings on bravewords.com as well as hardradio.com.
Good to talk to you guys. Let's get this one going, man.
All right.
Yeah, we love the Priest one so much. This is going to be a great follow-up to Priest.
That's right. For those that don't know, this is going to be actually our debut podcast for the Shockwaves Skull Session. We did a previous one with the same lineup, myself, Martin, and Monty, on Judas Priest. We had a great Judas Priest debate that's still available on hardradio.com and iTunes, and this is our first for the Shockwaves Skull Session on Deep Purple. We're going to go through the entire Deep Purple catalog, give our honest views, and battle it out, so to speak.
We'll try and make sure it doesn't get too bloody.
Yeah.
Maybe it should be bloody. Maybe that's what the listeners want.
You hear that in the background there, Martin?
What's that?
You hear that in the background?
Hear what? I hear a tiny bit of an echo. I hear Monty not too loud. I hear you loud and clear.
No, that's the sound of Monte Conner lacing up his gloves.
Oh, okay.
So he's getting ready for this, man.
Not good.
All right, well, let's go ahead and start out. The first three Deep Purple records, we'll kind of combine them into one. We got Shades of... you know what's funny? I always thought the self-titled one was the debut one. But that was the latter of the three.
Because Shades of Deep Purple's the first one. So.
Shades was the first in 1968, and then Book of Taliesin, is that how it's said?
I think it's Taliesin, yeah.
Taliesin, that was also 68. And then 69 was the self-titled. I'll start off by saying, of course, I wasn't familiar with Deep Purple when these came out. I would have been like 3 or 4. I had actually bought a vinyl, a double vinyl. I don't know if you remember this. Martin probably would. It was called Purple Passages.
Yeah.
Well, and they kind of combined all 3 records into a double. Got that, and, after knowing, the Deep Purple with Ian Gillan, I obviously wasn't nearly as impressed. But what about you guys? When were you first?
Well, I mean, I'm with you, Bob. I pretty much...
This is Monty speaking here.
Yes, this is Monty.
You got to get people to distinguish the voices first.
I'm the one with the nasal voice. There you go. That's how you know it's me. But yeah, I'm with you, Bob. I pretty much heard about those records through the compilation Purple Passages, and it's a bit confusing because, as you said, the self-titled record, Deep Purple, which you would think is the first, is really the third record. And, I never knew how to say the Book of Taliesin. I used to think it was Talianism or something, but now I know it's Taliesin. And, I just never really knew much about those records. Even when you listen to them now, they all kind of flow together. It's not like you hear this giant progress from the first to the third. They all have similar production, similar songs. To me, it just feels like a big melting pot of, like, Deep Purple when they were kind of getting their act together. But, looking back, there's some great tracks, like Hush, which is on Shades of Deep Purple, was a really, really big single for those guys at the time.
I hate that song.
Oh, I love it. God, I think
it's timeless, too. I mean, you see it now even on the new Jaguar commercial.
Yeah, I think it's a great track. And I think there's a track called Mandrake Root, which is a track that they played on some of the early live records. And then, of course, there was Ring That Neck.
I love that title.
Yeah, it wasn't Ring That Neck. Martin, wasn't that the one, like, where they would play that little coda of the song and they'd always put it into the live shows?
Not sure about that, but that is one of the ones that actually does have a little bit of the telltale Richie Blackmore, John Lord kind of thing going on that Deep Purple got famous for, right?
Right.
Yeah. I mean, those are the 3 songs that stand out to me. I'm looking at the track listing right now. I'm on All Music Guide. Like, I believe out of the first 3 records, those songs I just named were the big ones. And, I got to tell you, as a kid, when I did hear Purple Passages and I heard some of these records, we forgot Kentucky Woman, actually. Kentucky Woman was on.
A Neil Diamond song. Yeah, it was cool, and I liked Neil Diamond, but, my mom listened to Neil Diamond. It's like, I can't like this.
I mean, that's a pretty cool track, and actually, Ring That Neck is called Hard Road, in parentheses, Ring That Neck. So those would pretty much be the 4 songs that people know from these records, and for me, Deep Purple in Rock was the first record I got into, so when I went back and heard this stuff, it really didn't do much for me when I was a teenager, although now hearing them as an adult, they're actually pretty cool. They're not as, like, unheavy as you would think. And
well, considering the timeline, I mean, 68, 69, it was probably one of the heaviest, albums during that time, even though Rod Evans had more of a Tom Jones-style vocal, kind of thing, and they did versions of Hey Joe, which was kind of interesting, and, a lot more kind of a Cream, Iron Butterfly kind of sound, I guess.
Well, it's interesting you said Iron Butterfly because who was it, Martin? Wasn't it Rod Evans, the singer on these records, later went on to form Captain Beyond?
Yeah, he went on to Captain Beyond, and Iron Butterfly does make a lot of sense because... go ahead, Monty.
Captain Beyond has an Iron Butterfly guy in the band as well, right?
Rhino?
True.
Yeah. Well, no, wasn't it Lee Dorman?
Rhino was an Iron Butterfly.
Right, but Lee Dorman, the bassist of Iron Butterfly, I believe was in Captain Beyond.
Yeah,
or maybe he produced it.
I'm not sure he went
there. Getting mixed up, but I know there's a connection there. And so like Rod Evans definitely went on to fame outside of Deep Purple in like a totally legitimate, great heavy rock band.
Kind of underground, though. Not many people know Captain Beyond.
Well, when you listen to Captain Beyond, the vocals on it are great. You hear that record and you're like, well, wait, maybe Deep Purple didn't need to replace Rod Evans. Maybe he could have gone on and sung on in rock because, Captain Beyond's a pretty ass-kicking record, so I think that really proved to a lot of people that Rod Evans was more than just like a nobody on the first 3 Deep Purple records.
Do either of you guys remember jumping ahead when Rod Evans reformed the band, I believe in 1980, with all different guys and called it Deep Purple?
Yeah, there was that big dust-up and a big legal battle. Didn't Fleetwood Mac have a lineup like that was completely fake? And then a lot of the 60s doo-wop groups had that kind of thing.
Yeah, it was a big thing, and I just remember Deep Purple in particular because they played the Long Beach Arena, and actually I believe they sold it out, so that just shows shows you how big.
Oh,
but
yeah.
it was only Rod Evans.
Yeah.
And with the Nick, it might have been the original bass player, Nick Simper. I don't know, but it was pretty much a whole different band, and I just heard it was awful. But I remember, actually seeing on the news at the time, they had a thing about it with Blackmore, little short interview.
They were playing in Staten Island when I was a teenager, that lineup, and it was really big news because you got to realize this is the time when Deep Purple was broken up. So just the idea of like, opening a newspaper and seeing that Deep Purple was playing was like we were shitting our pants. We were super excited. And we actually went to the venue and it got canceled. We went the day of the show and it just didn't materialize.
No, I totally agree with you guys about this whole idea about how nobody really distinguishes those three albums between each other. I mean, they are just so separate from the whole Deep Purple thing. Yeah, obviously, you guys touched upon it. The main thing is that you've got a different lead singer and a different bass player. When they get Roger and Ian in, all hell breaks loose kind of thing, for whatever reason. But those records are from a totally different time. They're like the first couple of Yes records. They're like Status Quo before Pile Driver. They're like Golden Earring before Moontan and all that stuff.
They're like started out before, in Trance.
Well, yeah, but this is even more, textbook psych is what you're hearing on these things. And the other interesting comparative is them with Vanilla Fudge. They both had the honking Hammond organ thing, and they both made their living through covers, almost. I mean, there were a lot of covers going on.
Well, Blackmore mentions Vanilla Fudge. He said that was an influence on them, which I don't really see. I mean, I never was a
went
huge...
back and forth.
Yeah.
Well, the influence is very specific. It's the idea of covers. It's the idea of making songs big, wide, and dramatic, and it's the idea of stretching them out and making them melodramatic even, and using organ.
Right.
Yeah, Hammond organ. So, Monty touched upon the fact that they're actually quite good, and if what you do is compare them to other psych records of the day, they're kind of interesting and even a little bit hard-hitting and aggressive. But yeah, it's three records that fairly Deep Purple fans, basically it's just this big mysterious black hole that they try to go listen to every once in a while, and just nothing satisfying really comes out of it.
Right on. Well,
That's true. You summed it up well.
Very well. Let's move on, I guess, to the Ian Gillan era, Ian Gillan and Logic Glover. Before we get to In Rock, one of the greatest albums of all time, I'll start off by saying, Deep Purple, which was kind of misleading, they put together, you guys probably remember this, I probably heard it once, the Concerto for Group and Orchestra. That was the Philharmonic, was that?
And if we even had less concern for that than the original Psych album. I mean, that nobody pays any attention.
And considering that was, everyone considers In Rock Ian Gillan's debut, which I consider, but actually this was in 1969, a year before In Rock.
Yeah, good point. I would have skipped right over that one. And, ironically enough, I believe that performance was put out on DVD by Eagle Rock, if I'm not mistaken. I know
I think they found it back, and they also, didn't they kind of redo the whole thing, or redo
Yeah, they redid it. They recreated it years later, but I believe, if I'm not mistaken, both versions may be out on Eagle, the original concert and then the redo years later.
Yeah, I went to the site and I saw so many reissues and stuff from BBC sessions and all these old stuff that are out on DVD now. Yeah. So it's,
Deep Purple are one of the most collectible bands, period. I mean, I've lost track of all the live records that have come out over the years. It's insane.
Sure.
They're a band you gotta have money to be a diehard fan.
But it's interesting that the classical thing, you've got Ritchie Blackmore liking that sort of thing, and then John Lord recently said, "Hey man, I'm getting up in years. I've got to quit this band and go pursue my dream finally, which is to be a classical artist." And, the whole Malcolm Arnold, I guess that is this famous conductor guy from back then, this classical dude. It was, I believe, John Lord fueling that whole thing more than anybody.
And before In Rock, of course, they did the single, Black Knight, correct?
Yeah.
Or was that just after? That was right before In Rock, wasn't it?
I think it was just before.
Yeah, it should have been on the record. That was a great track. It's amazing that a band could, put out such a great track and have it be successful as a single and then don't put it on the record.
I know either the single was reissued later because it kind of became successful a little bit later on.
Yeah, it came around here and there. I remember there was a fairly legitimate, authentic greatest hits album called 24 Karat Purple, I think.
Yes.
And that one had Black Knight on it. I love the track. I love the fact that it is this proto-heavy metal classic, but it does sound a little unfinished compared to In Rock.
Right.
Yeah, so the production's not quite as developed. That track also appeared in another compilation. I don't know if you guys saw this. It was called Powerhouse.
I have that purple cover,
I know it's on Deepest Purple, too, or whatever, I think.
Yeah, it made the rounds on a bunch of different compilations. But that was the first time I heard it was on Powerhouse. So Just to correct you on one thing, Bob, and I didn't know this myself until recently, but the In Rock record, the actual title of the record is Deep Purple in Rock.
Oh,
Like,
really?
if you look it up on Amazon or anywhere, it'll say Deep Purple, and then it'll say Deep Purple in Rock. Like,
Interesting.
Yeah, that's like the official title of the record as far as...
But is it up to Amazon to decide these things? I mean,
No, but I see it everywhere. I see it all over the place like that.
Yeah, I've always thought well, it's like saying Rainbow Rising. A lot of people just call it Rising.
Yeah, but
and the band name was actually Blackmore's Rainbow at the time.
I think it's a little different because just calling it In Rock, it's by saying Deep Purple in Rock, you're really solidifying the cover image.
Right.
You know, so I kind of get it. I know what you're saying, but I
just looked at the cover, the spine, and the centerpiece.
Well, I'm sure we're going to be getting a lot of emails about this one, so send in those emails. So who wants to start off, In Rock or Deep Purple in Rock?
I'd love to start out this one.
All right, Martin.
Because that album is so important. I mean, it is just, you know, I always talk about how there's like 3 records in 1970 that are the big deal, but this one is the biggest deal. I mean, granted, it is later in the year. Actually, it's June 1970, so it's the middle of the year. But the fact of the matter is it blows away Black Sabbath, even the second Black Sabbath album. It is just so classy and hard-hitting and heavy and dramatic and technical. You know, the only thing I don't like about it too much is the album cover and the production.
I like the album cover. I think
but
that was
other than
very
that,
clever.
the production.
A lot of people like the album cover. I know.
I wasn't crazy about the production, though. I agree.
Yeah, it's
Before
a little
its
bit
time, it was,
mid-rangey.
Yeah.
I mean, really, it's 1970, the middle of 1970. I mean, how many other albums sounded better? I mean, not too many. But the fact of the matter is that thing basically single-handedly invented metal. But if you don't want to say single-handedly, you've got to bring in MC5, Stooges, Blue Cheer from Stateside, which is just like light years behind the evolution.
But I consider that more garage rock.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah, it's just
Deep
loud
Purple. I mean, just the guitar, Blackmore's guitar on that, I think really defined metal. I mean, you listen to any other guitar players. I mean, he was doing, maybe Hendrix excluded, but nobody was going off like Blackmore did on that album. I mean, you listen to the End of Hard Lovin' Man, and so, I mean, that defined heavy metal guitar to me.
The End of Hard Lovin' Man is pretty over the top for sure.
Absolutely.
Then speaking of the mix, that was actually probably the worst mix on the whole record. But what's interesting about the sonics of that record is they did this record, it wasn't all in one session like today. They did that record all over the place in like 3 or 4 different sessions. So, there's definite sonic differences from track to track on that record. Like I said, Hard Lovin' Man, the last track on the record, to me sounds like muddier and less defined than some of the others. You've got a track like, Into the Fire, which just, my favorite thing about Into the Fire, I don't know if you guys ever noticed this, but, you have like the guitars on one side and the keyboards on the other side.
Right.
If you put if you just put it to the speaker where the guitars are coming out of, they're the most distorted guitars you've ever heard in your life up to 1970. The cabinet literally sounds like it's falling apart. Like, the heaviest thing I've ever heard in my life up until that point is the guitar tone on Into the Fire. But in general, I agree with what you said, Martin. To me, if, being our age, 43, I'm 43, and being into the, all the hundreds of bands I'm into and the experience I have of years of being a rock and metal fan, it's pretty hard when someone says to me, like, what are your top 10 favorite records of all time? That's almost an impossible thing to answer. But no question, this thing would be in the top 10, if not the top 5.
Oh, absolutely. And it still sounds today. I mean, production-wise, sure. I mean, compared to, the production of today. But song-wise, you listen to it now. I mean, there's some of the heaviest songs,
Oh, my God. They never beat that record to this day, I don't think. And it's completely magical. There's not a bad song on the record. Flight of the Rat, Into the Fire, Living Wreck. On Child of Time, of course.
And just the guitar-keyboard interplay on that. Now, tell me, on the original vinyl, I never had the intro to Speed King.
I didn't either.
I never did.
That was the U.S. edition.
I talked to people in Europe, and they always had it. Back on vinyl, they were saying. Do you know anything about this, Martin?
No, I don't know this controversy. How does the intro go? I think I have it.
It's like just an instrumental intro, it's just kind of a keyboard, real dark, heavy. It builds up, and then before the riff comes into Speed King, it's about a 2-minute intro.
Damn, I don't know why I can't remember that.
So wait, our version, the U.S. version, just starts right on the drum. It goes, there's a drum.
Yeah.
But there is definitely an intro that I never heard.
Well, if you listen to the remixes, like the Roger Glover remixes, the intro is included.
Well, that intro appears on all the versions of Speed King, like the European imports of the record and the various compilations it's been on. But I didn't hear that intro myself until later on.
Okay, I don't have it either then. I just played it.
Okay.
So,
Well, what happened is, very often in those days, the American label would change, the UK pressing. Either they changed the cover like they did with a bunch of the Uriah Heep covers, or they would flip tracks around like they did with Uriah Heep Salisbury, they, like with Bird of Prey on the second record and the first.
Yeah.
Right.
So I believe what happened is someone in America probably just, since that was the first song on the record, they probably just wanted to make it more hard-hitting and cut out the intro. That some U.S. suit probably decided it.
Sure.
Someone like Monte, who's famous for wanting to front load.
Well, I got to tell you,
get to the point.
I got to tell you, I've heard that intro, and I don't think it's that great. I actually think it is a little more powerful without it.
Yeah, I kind of agree. It just hits you right on. But yeah, I mean, I think that whole album, I think what made Deep Purple so different is they were really, truly one of the first to combine classical music. Because back then, heavy metal wasn't really a term. They, combined hard rock and roll with classical, whereas all the other bands, all the British bands even, Yardbirds, Zeppelin, Faces, Humble Pie, Free, were into the American blues thing.
Yeah.
And even Sabbath, they claimed to be blues, but it was more, you listen to the debut, there was a lot of jazz influence on that.
Right.
This one was hard, just classical music, and I think with those keyboards, the B3 keyboards, it just makes it heavy as hell. I mean, you had, Uriah Heep and Jethro Tull, I guess, in a lot of, more progressive sounding bands.
Yeah, but they had blues too. There was tons of blues on the first Tull record, and even, a lot of it on the first
True, but it does bring a lot of classical elements. But you're right, it's not nearly as hard hitting as this album. I mean, this album, for 1970, just great. And some of the songs, like you listen to Into the Fire, it's got a real strong Beatles influence on the vocals. It sounds like Beatles gone metal. You listen to the vocal pattern on that.
Yeah.
Child in Time, I mean, to me, that's a rock and roll class. That's right up there with Stairway to Heaven and Freebird. I mean, the guitar, keyboard interplay on that, and, songs like Flight of the Rat, I mean, that was completely original at that time.
Well, actually, on that point, one of the neat little trivia things, of course, is that a lot of the melody of Child in Time was taken from It's a Beautiful Day, Bombay Calling.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
I haven't heard that.
That's the name of the song. Ian told me that once, and I went and played it because I happen to have that album, and it's dead identical. It's the same, melody that opens that song, the melody we all sort of remember.
Well, I didn't know that either.
Greatest guitar solo. I mean, that solo right then was just so over the top, and Ian Gillan's lyrics, the vocals, how passionate. I mean, just a total groundbreaking song, I think.
And let's also not forget some of the B-sides from that record. Obviously, Black Knight is associated with that record, even though it's not part of those sessions, but it's from that era.
True.
But there's another track, I don't know if you guys are aware of, but I know it was on the Powerhouse compilation, and when they did the 25th anniversary, or maybe it was the 20th anniversary reissue of the record in the UK, they put it on. That was a track called Cry Free.
Right.
Great track. Probably not as good as this, definitely not as quite up to par with the 7 that made the record, but not far below it. It easily could have been on there.
Yeah.
So, Fireball.
I'll take Fireball first.
All right, Monty.
Okay. See, I work in the music business, and I can tell you that every time a band makes a classic debut record, I'd say in 75% of the cases you have the sophomore slump, right? Now, even though Fireball was not the sophomore record, in a way it was, because you've made a statement within rock, and you made this amazing record, and when you're making in rock, no one cares. They're doing it, there's no anticipation, there's no expectation. But of course, once a band comes out with a masterpiece like in rock, all of a sudden everyone wants to hear what's coming next, and all of a sudden there's pressure from the band to get in from the record label, to go do a new record, and the journalists want to hear it, and there's all this anticipation. And that's, of course, when the problem starts. So in a lot of ways, Fireball really was the second record, and true to form, it did suffer from the sophomore slump in that it's just not as creative, it's not as fleshed out as in rock. They didn't have the time. They just didn't really have the ideas. So although it's not a bad record by any means, it still blows away 90% of other bands' records.
Sure.
To me, it's definitely a watered down, less dynamic, less imaginative version of in rock. So it's a little disappointing, but it's still a kick-ass record. If In Rock is a 10+, I give Fireball a 9. Still a solid record, but definitely lacking the magic of In Rock. Even though it's got some amazing tracks like Strange Kind of Woman, one of their all-time great Deep Purple songs, a track like Fireball, the title track.
Oh, the gloves are
one of the
coming out.
first speed metal
Very
songs.
different from
People
me. All right, so Martin, I take it that you think this was as great, if not better than In Rock.
I'll kind of go down that path with you, but I definitely cannot stand Strange Kind of Woman.
Oh, I love Strange Kind of
Hate
Woman.
that song.
It's a
That's
catchy
the live
song,
version.
yeah.
The version's the definitive version, but and a song like Fools, which is pound.
Fools is one of the heaviest songs ever written at that time. The organ on that, and that's like a church heaviness. It's not doom rock like Sabbath was, and Blackmore's solo, what he does with the volume knob, that whole middle part of it is so eerie.
And then when that riff
so
kicks
heavy.
in after that part, it's just like hallelujah.
Absolutely. Great lyrics. Ian Gillan sounds tougher than hell on it. I mean, just, yeah, that's an amazing, that's one of the most underrated tracks. Not many people even know that song.
I'd say the big tracks off this record besides Fools, for me, Strange Kind of Woman and Fireball. Even No No No's got its moments. And then, of course, No One Came. I wouldn't rate it as one of the better tracks, but that's a pretty heavy track, too, in a different way than Fools.
That opening is very heavy. The opening.
Yeah.
What
I would say is I would give this album a 10 as well, just like in rock. And I say it does some things even a little bit better. I think there's more charm and more personality and less one-dimensionality, just basically on the rote surface of loud heavy, right? There's lots going on in this album. Monty's right that there does seem to be kind of something lacking in the writing, but I just love the looseness of it, the daring Led Zeppelin 3-ness of it. Of course, we got Fireball, which, everybody talks about inventing speed metal, and it kind of does.
And that's a very different song, even for Deep Purple.
Yeah, and Strange Kind of Woman, I just never really liked that song. I just don't like the swaggering sort of stripper rock, obvious bluesiness.
They did a lot of that to follow, and I wasn't that crazy. That one I kind of liked because it was like one of their first, but they tried to emulate that a lot in their latter albums, and I didn't.
But I totally think No 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 is a great track. Anyone's Daughter I even like. The Mule I like. Fools I like. No One Came actually is my favorite track on this album. I just love the groove of that song. That
great, very unique
dichotomy going on. I just think it's a great song. Unfortunately, there's only 7 songs on it, and it's kind of weird that it does that because a lot of them are really in no hurry to impress you. They meander kind of thing, and it is this very weird up and down album. But you've got to give them credit for doing that 70s thing that we all appreciate now, where you go and just make this completely off the wall album that no one expects.
Absolutely.
Well, the thing is, as I said, I rate that album a 9. I still think it's an ass-kicking record, but you just can't. How can you say it's as good as In Rock? You're giving them both 10s. Like, In Rock is just literally like probably one of the top 5 records of all time, and this just doesn't hang with it. It's a solid record. I love it, but like you just can't.
The songs weren't as good.
It won't hold up to In Rock, dude. There's no way.
I think there's certain songs that are probably as good or better. I mean, I think Fools is almost up there with like A Child in Time kind of thing, and there's some real heavy. Yeah, think about Deep Purple, and they do this a lot. There's real heavy moments of their songs, riffs and stuff, but song per song, it's not quite as good,
Or as heavy.
True.
You know what we should mention, guys? We obviously all have the same version of this record, but the European edition had a song called Demon's Night.
That was the other song, yeah.
Wait, Demon's Eye, right?
Demon's Eye, yeah.
Right, and I believe that Demon's Eye was on the European version in place of Anyone's Daughter.
Go ahead and let's start off Machine Head.
Okay, well, one thing I love about that album is the production. I think the production on that is better than every single album they made. Burn, I think, is pretty good production, too. I love certain things about this album, but when I look at it with a real cold, analytical eye, I can't rate it that highly because I don't like Lazy very much. Smoke on the Water, I figure, is kind of average. We all know the story about Never Before being kind of written half-heartedly as some sort of single, and they all think it's average, and I think it's average. But what you've got left, Highway Star, Maybe I'm a Leo, Pictures of Home, Space Truckin'. I mean, on any given day, I could put those 4 tracks in my top 12 or 15 favorite Deep Purple tracks of all time. They're amazing songs, all 4 of them. I love the performances on here. I think everybody is just perfectly placed within the mix. But yeah, it's just, unfortunately for me, it's almost like ZZ Top Fandango, where it's got this major flaw where a whole bunch of the album I have no patience for. But the rest of it is amazing.
But dude, how could you just said a song like Smoke on the Water was not good. I mean, granted, we've all heard that song so many times you want to puke when it comes on. But if you can distance yourself from that and think about the first time you heard it when it was fresh and exciting, I mean, it's a fucking amazing track. It's just, like, is it really just that you don't like it or you're just sick to death of it? That I could understand, but to say it's, like, not a great track.
Actually, the first time I heard it, I wasn't even that crazy about it.
Dude, it's not like the first riff that anybody learned.
Exactly. The great thing, I've thought about this, and the thing is about Smoke on the Water is that riff is stunning. But when it collapses into the verse, it becomes this meandering, muddy, sort of jammy thing with
but the verse, I know, but the verse is when the story takes over. And it's fascinating if you know that it's a true story about what really happened. That adds to the magic of it. Here this band came. This wasn't even a song they planned on. It came about by accident because of what happened. Right. Wound up being the big hit. It's like a storybook ending.
Yeah.
Well, it's kind of interesting that became a hit, and it was just kind of a filler track, in a sense. And it was probably the simplest. What's so funny is, Richie Blackmore, as far as I'm concerned, is probably the greatest guitar player around, and he wrote probably the most simplest guitar riff ever, and that's the riff that everybody remembers.
Well, the same way that everyone remembers Iron Man, or it's those simple riffs.
Right.
But another thing I got to disagree with you on, Martin, is, and this is really weird because I know that compared to most reviewers, and that's one of the reasons I love your books, is because in most album reviews you comment on the production, and I'm really big on production as well, and most reviewers don't even mention that. And I think, every time I read your comments about production, I always think you're totally dead on, and it's one of the things I admire the most about you is, your production expertise. And you had mentioned that you love the production on this. I hate the production on this, and let me tell you why. Because it just sounds too clean to me. The whole record sounds really clean and sterile, whereas Fireball sounds raw. I mean, In Rock sounds the most raw. Fireball sounds a little less raw. And to me, this just sounds too polished.
That's exactly, I agree with you on the, exactly what those records are, but I don't like the raw stuff. I don't want to hear a whole lot of mid-range. I want to hear, I wish this sounded like Pink Floyd Dark Side of the Moon, and they played what they played.
But it doesn't sound as heavy to me.
No, and I don't care. I like a warm, fat production sound where you can hear everything nice and clear, and it's not hurting your ears kind of thing.
Well, the songs sound different. Like you listen to Space Truck, and that's such a bass-heavy song. The intro, I mean, it's just so heavy.
Yeah, he's playing on the key. That's the organ. And I love how those songs build, like Smoke on the Water, how the instruments just fall in one at a time.
Oh, totally.
A little bit of a similar thing on Space Truck. Yeah. But, when you listen to Deep Purple, really the organ is playing at the same time as the guitar.
That's what beefs it up so heavy.
Yeah,
absolutely.
It's the mesh of those two that form the whole sound.
And it's so original. Pictures of Home, great song. That's actually one of my favorite songs off that album.
I'm digging Pictures of Home. Martin, I totally agree with you on Never Before. It's crap.
I don't like that song. I like Maybe I'm a Leo. Great, catchy song.
I got to disagree with you, guys.
Really?
That one to me is boring as hell.
I think it's kind of a catchy, fun song. The rest of it, lazy. I was never that crazy about it. It's got a catchy guitar riff, but I never liked the song. It was too, rock and roll or whatever.
I'll give you an example of how catchy Maybe I'm a Leo is. For 20, 30 years, you know how you have certain songs and you don't know where they come from, but they're constantly going through your head like 2-3 times a day. This one little collection of songs that just drives you crazy. And that is one of the ones for me because I'm a drummer as well. And that one has all that counterpoint kind of drumming stuff going on. So you're walking around idly tapping your fingers and stuff like that. And that song is just kind of interesting to a drummer.
And you don't find that song too bluesy?
No. I know what you mean, though. When I think about it, I guess I do think it's kind of bluesy. But I think it's mostly riffy.
Well, one thing, I do love Highway Star, one of the greatest songs, one of the greatest guitar solos. But the live version is like 100 times better, I got to say, on Made in Japan. And usually it's, I don't care for the live versions as much, but I mean, just the live version, the way it's beefed up. Let me ask you something. You've probably all seen the video of that on the, was it the Beat Club or one of those?
Yeah, he's singing different lyrics.
And it seems like, now, what I'm thinking is the song must have been just written, and he's just throwing in lyrics there.
Well,
because
two things happened. Either he forgot the lyrics, or they hadn't really written them yet, in the song, because a lot of times...
That's what I'm thinking. They didn't written them, and he was throwing like Mickey Mouse. It just, because you always got that weird sense of humor.
When you hear that Black Sabbath live record that was recorded in Paris, that was also put out,
I've got that on.
Yeah, that was recorded. That record was done before they recorded Paradise.
Well, I know War Picture's all different.
Well, that's what happened. Is I think on Highway Star, maybe that was cut before they recorded.
Totally what I'm thinking. But it's so horrible because you can totally tell he's just like fishing for words to say.
And you know what else, too, is, I know I've been very vocal in the past about thinking that Ian Gillan's he doesn't really have it anymore as a singer compared to what he used to have. And, and that's not to put the guy down. I mean, how old is he? Like 60 at this point? I mean, you expect that the voice can't hold out, but Highway Star is something that's definitely difficult for him to sing these days. You know the part where it goes, I love her, I need her. He can't do that. I mean, I think there was a Deep Purple Montreux 2005 DVD that came out, and he just sounds like a wounded bear on that.
Yeah.
And, people are just like, oh, it was an off night, but I don't think so. It's just a really hard thing to do, to be 60 years old and try and do a part like that, you know?
For the record, I believe he's 63.
Okay. Well, hey, as I said, nothing against the guy by saying that. It's just, I'll be lucky if I could get out of my bed when I'm 63, let alone...
Before the end of this podcast, we're going to have you do a scream for us, Monty. We tried on the Judas Priest one, but at the end of this podcast, we're going to get you to scream.
Hey, I got made fun of by some of my friends for singing on the Priest one, and I didn't think I sang that bad.
Well, wait till you do your King Diamond scream, then we'll all see.
Maybe I should do the Highway Star part and show Ian Gillan that even I could do it now.
There you go. Well, he's got 20 years on you, so...
I'm not going to do it.
So, now, actually, was Made in Japan came out before Who Do We Think We Are? Is that correct? As far as the live albums, we'll do Made in Japan and Made in Europe. But that was such an important record because that was, one of the, I wouldn't say the most popular live albums, but one of the most infamous live heavy metal records to come out. And for its time, now I know that was a Martin Birch production, one of the best produced live albums. But the songs just fucking drag on. And that was the one thing I always hated about, bands like Purple or Zeppelin, and then, of course, later Rainbow. They would always extend, these great 5-minute classic songs into 15, 20-minute songs, like Space Truckin', The Mule.
Yeah, and it might have worked in concert, but not on vinyl.
Exactly.
And also, that's, again, you totally hit the nail on the head, Bob, because that's the thing I don't like about Deep Purple Live, is the shit is way too long. It's like, I'm not a musician. I don't want to go see jamming. I want the songs.
Especially a song like The Mule, an instrumental.
This is so cool hearing you guys say this, because everybody rates this as one of the great live albums of all time.
No way.
I hate it for that reason.
Yeah, I mean, everything else about it is great. Sound-wise, performance-wise, it is one of the best produced albums. It's got such a live feel, but the content is just, I guess if you're a musician, you'd be into it, but as a listener, as a fan...
Who needs the 20-minute Space Truckin'?
Absolutely,
it was fine at like 4 minutes or whatever it was. I'd rather have...
But the live version of Highway Star, I'll say again, is one of the greatest tracks ever.
And the live version of Strange Kind of Woman for me on here is tremendous. Like my little pet song there. I think it's better than the version on...
And I think live Smoke on the Water is much, much heavier. I don't care for the studio version as much, but the live version, just the groove and the hi-hat.
And I like the little impromptu thing he does at the beginning where he changes
the
up and he's
that is very, very cool. So I guess we touched enough on that. Should we get into Who Do We Think We Are?
Sure.
Let's do that. Who wants to start that now? Who Do We Think We Are is 1973, last album with Gillan and Glover. You want to start off, Monty?
Yeah, the funny part is, as a teenager, I see things very differently than I do now as an adult. Your tastes are much more refined, and I remember being pretty pleased with that record when I first got it, but I listen to it now, and it just really is kind of disappointing. Obviously, I think Woman from Tokyo is a great track. It was probably like one of the band's biggest singles ever after Smoke on the Water. I love that song. It's hard not to like Rat Bat Blue just because it's heavy, but like songs like Mary Long and even Super Trooper and Smooth Dancer, they're heavy songs. They got good groove, but like they're just not the kind of songs you really want to go back and play. They're not meaningful songs. It's just
I agree.
I don't know what it is. There's plenty of heavy shit on that record, but it's not heavy shit that's great. Like to me, it's definitely the worst of the Mark II lineup. Like the first real stumble for the band with Gillan in them, and you could tell he was kind of like on his way out the door and was losing interest, and it was just kind of
I agree.
Like I'd rate that record like a 6 or a 7, whereas I would put it Rock at 10, Fireball at 9, Machine Head at... I guess I got to put Machine Head at 9, just even though I don't like the production, it's got so much great material, and and again, this is like a 6 or a 7. It was a stumble for them.
What about you?
Yeah, I think it's a stumble as well, but it actually, given that I am so sick of the catalog, it's one that I can go back to and listen to and actually enjoy. I actually disagree that, like, Woman from Tokyo and Strange Kind of Woman are just the same kind of badly written song for me. I do love Smooth Dancer because it's totally heavy. I like Mary Long. I like Super Trooper. There's a sort of weird charm and weird kind of evenness about this album. You're right. I know the guys look down on it and think about how hard it was to make, and there is disinterest, and there's kind of like this funny kind of malaise that sits over the whole thing.
Yeah.
But I can go back to this album and find things to play simply because I'm not as sick of it all the time.
Well, that is a good point. Like, it is interesting to put the record on because it's not the kind of record you've heard a lot. You're not sick of the song, so I'll agree with you on that point.
Yeah.
Definitely.
And I would give it probably an 8. I would give it a pretty high rating still.
Well, of course, Woman for Tokyo is probably the only hit off there, and I actually like that song. When I first heard it, I wasn't crazy about it, but I think it's a cool, catchy song. I love Ian Gillan's vocals on it. When he comes in on it, it's just so heavy. He's got that rough voice, and it just sounds cool, the contrast to that, and then to the melodic, chorus on that. But the rest of the record, you guys are right. And the thing about it, I think the band, they were wearing thin at that point. I think they were riding high on the success of Machine Head and the live album. And it seems like they had like this arrogant kind of attitude. If you read all the liner notes in Who Do We Think We Are, I know it's kind of like a sarcastic kind of thing about how they're, Deep Purple's like the greatest band in the world kind of thing. And it seems to me like it was kind of an arrogant approach on that. And even the title, Who Do We Think We Are, you would expect the album to be so much better than it was, and the songs just weren't there. Mary Long, some of the other stuff, I always liked Ian Gillan's kind of, quirky kind of lyrics, and the fact that he always wrote about the neighborhood or just about inside, things that no one else could probably relate to except, people around his camp or whatever. It was kind of a cool thing, but I never really got into it. I didn't get Rat Bat Blue kind of had a cool riff. It just seemed everything was kind of cheesy. It wasn't the Deep Purple that you would expect from after hearing Machine Head and the live record. It could have been a much better record.
One other note I'd like to make about Woman from Tokyo. I think the mellow part in that goes back badly to the Psych days, and I think the riff part on that is a bad sort of remake of the substandard Never Before kind of riffing. So to me, just that whole song just seems poorly written.
I love that mellow part in this song.
I like it too. I think it works. I think it works really well.
Yeah, it's just very well written, and
well, you're both wrong.
And the way you expect it to go back, and then it just goes back into one more measure of the mellow part,
Yeah.
All right, well, let's move on. So we got David Coverdale, Glenn Hughes enters the lineup. Out goes Ian Gillan and Roger Glover. Burn, 1974, a classic. Who wants to start that one?
I guess I can start that one. I'll start with this little story I often repeat. My biggest memory of Burn is, I think it was maybe grade 4 or something, maybe a little later, but half the class kind of did this like French little folk dance thing, and it's because we were just starting to get into girls, and you could walk them home at 3:30, 4 o'clock when it was starting to get dark kind of thing, and we thought, oh, kind of cool, here we are out with the girls walking them home kind of thing. A few of the more miscreant bad guys got the better gig, and what they ended up doing, and this was performed in front of the school in the church gym, was they had the song Deep Purple Burn playing, and they were all dressed up like criminals running around with machine guns, doing kind of an air guitar kind of dance, running around to the crowd, shooting everybody with these machine guns. So take that for a school assembly. Anyways, that album, to me, as kids, we didn't really like it that much. We loved the album cover. It was the spookiest, scariest album cover you could imagine as a little kid. But the songs are definitely not very heavy. There is already that bluesy funkiness coming into it, this wayward sort of experimentalism. Burn, of course, is one of the great classics of all time from that band. Might Just Take Your Life. I was in a bar band later, and we actually played that song live, and it's got some really nice little trippy drumming things going down. Lay Down, Stay Down was a pretty good heavy song. It was almost like the melodic, sweet version of Burn in a way, because it had all that crazy Ian Pace stuff going on. But God, all of side 2 is just bizarre. I mean, it's stuff that no one really remembers. Mistreated is just so boring to me.
I agree.
The big blues. Sail Away back on side 1 is still kind of cool. That's almost like a funky Motown kind of thing. I mean, it reminds me of, I don't know why this is off the top of my head, but maybe I'm juxtaposing the two things from my youth, but I almost picture that as a good soundtrack song to the Fat Albert cartoon, essentially that whole side 1 is quite salvageable, and pretty much the whole side 2 is not very salvageable to me.
What about you,
boy,
Monty?
I'm sharpening my claws here. I absolutely worship Burn. I think it's an amazing, amazing record. I do agree with you, Martin, that that's the kind of record we probably can appreciate more as adults than we could as teenagers, but to me, Burn is one of the greatest examples in the history of rock of like a band just completely reinventing their sound. Getting new guys in, just completely changing shit up and coming out with a whole different sound that's great, like that's equally as amazing as what they were doing, but in a totally different way. I think it was a genius move getting a complete unknown like David Coverdale, pairing him up with Glenn Hughes with that high-pitched voice of his, having those guys be the co-singers, coming out with this new bluesy sound that totally had the potential to alienate their audience, and yet doing it so successfully and so well. I mean, Martin, I was convinced you were going to be with me on this one. I honestly think it's an absolute masterpiece. Honestly, it's like my favorite Deep Purple record after In Rock. I think it's that good. Even though it's so completely different than In Rock, but just so well done and such great songwriting and such great vocals. It just got reissued, I guess, a few years back, and it's got these amazing liner notes by David Coverdale. And to me, that's a record that really, over the years, has just kind of like matured. And like, I don't think it was looked upon as a masterpiece when it came out, but I believe that there are a ton of people that feel the way I do about this record and have just come to look at it as the masterpiece that it is. I just cannot say enough about it. I love it.
Well, I would say I'm right in the middle between both you guys. I mean, the song Burn, I think, is an absolute masterpiece. You know, I mean, for that time, that was in early 74 that came out, and just the whole keyboard solo, then the guitar solo, and the drumming on that, Ian Pace's drumming on that, just absolutely phenomenal. I mean, you could kind of compare it to, Emerson, Lake and Palmer, but other than that, there's no one that had that intense drumming on a song like that, and the guitars and the riff on it, the vocals, I agree as far as bringing in Coverdale and Hughes to both do those vocals together. Just amazing. They sound so
they work
great
so
together.
well together. They're so
Absolutely
completely different. One guy's a throaty, bluesy,
right, and the other guy's a soulful, and it
Monty
just works.
is totally convincing me. He's right about on all those points, and I do love the album. But exactly, those kinds of things are really, really cool.
I will agree with Martin, though, that apart from Burn, the songs aren't all that strong. I actually love Sail Away. I think that's, when I first heard that, I didn't really care for it that much, but now I just, what a catchy, what a cool groove.
But I'm trying to figure out where you get the Fat Albert thing, Martin. All I'm thinking is the beginning of that track where it's going, like you could picture Fat Albert just like swaggering down the street. That's got to be what you're talking about.
The low vocal thing, too, the very low vocal.
Well, Lay Down, Stay Down, Smokes, Might Just Take Your Life. It's got the fattest groove you've ever heard. I mean, Mistreated.
I like that, but I just don't like the lyrics on that. I just think it's kind of, it's too funky. It's a little bit too
it is a little funky,
for Deep Purple. I mean, it was a real vast change, which I think was kind of cool. People that were used to the old Deep Purple was like pretty drastic of a change.
It definitely was. I agree. Like a track like Mistreated, it bored the shit out of me when I was young. But like now, as like a blues aficionado who loves blues, like I can.
See, again, I love the live version much better. I think listening to it, the studio version is very boring and dull. And what's going on here?
Come on, Glenn Hughes rocks on that. I think Glenn Hughes. Did he sing that entire track by himself, if I'm not mistaken?
Yeah,
that might be. I don't remember if Coverdale's on that.
I like You Fool No One. I love the drums on that. I mean, that is such a cool groove on that. It is a good record. Like I said, I'm pretty much in between you. I probably lean more toward Monty, but the song Burn itself is just an all-time classic, one of the greatest songs.
I agree with that.
I'd give it an 8.
But things definitely changed as far as I'm concerned with the next record, Stormbringer, which I think was, by far their worst. But 1974, same year, later that year, Burn was like in February, I think. This was like in November of 74. What do you say, Martin?
Well, again, I was just your young metalhead, one-dimensional. I loved the two heavy songs. The other songs I didn't care for at all, but later on...
You're talking about, obviously, Stormbringer and Lady Double Dealer.
Yeah, and later on I became, I began to appreciate the record. In the same way, Monty, phrases it so well, the way you can come back to a record like Burn, and you can do it with this one, too. I mean, there's just some really neat songs on it. I don't know. I'm pretty happy with the whole being brave to do this kind of thing. I just love the way, again, this is like a Led Zeppelin or a Queen or a Uriah Heep, who basically, frankly, did it badly when they made all these different types of records. But Deep Purple, they really can do no wrong in my mind. When I was a kid growing up, they could do lots of wrong. But now I look back on all these records, and I just love that bravery to just try something different.
What about you, Monty?
Well, I think listening, and a lot of this is based on interviews I've read, interviews with Richie Blackmore about that record, but to me it seems like that was the record, at least from what he said in these interviews, that was the record where Glenn Hughes and David Coverdale, the new guys, were basically like wrestling control, creative control of the band away from Blackmore.
And you could hear that, definitely.
And these guys were pretty much like taking control, and more of the blues and funk were creeping in, and Richie Blackmore did not like it. Felt like this was no longer his band, and he was really withdrawn on that record, and like basically at that point already starting to put together Rainbow.
Yeah.
And, you know, that was a record his heart wasn't in, the same way all of Deep Purple's heart wasn't in Who Do We Think We Are. And you could definitely hear it. I still think it's a great record. I'll put it on any day of the week. I can get into it, but it clearly does not hold a candle, no pun intended, to Burn. Burn is the shit. Stormbringer's like a really watered down, you know, like if Stormbringer had been the record that came out when Burn did, you know, Deep Purple might not exist today.
Right.
Not come back so successfully with Burn.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there's still plenty of great things to enjoy about that record. Obviously, the two tracks that we all liked as kids that rock. But, you know, I mean, look, I love David's voice. I love Glenn Hughes. I like the funk. You know, they can do no wrong in my book. So any track on that record still floats my boat. But it's clearly not the magic that, you know, Burn had.
You know, it's funny, when I first heard that, and it's interesting because what you guys say, because I'm trying going back to listening to that, because a lot of people say, oh, it's really a good record. You just, you know, you probably listened to it when you were young and you just weren't into it as much. I listened to it just recently, and I still kind of feel the same about it. I just never really got into it. And it's funny because I used to go to used record stores all the time. I couldn't afford to buy records new, so half the Deep Purple catalog I had probably ended up buying used. And I remember when the live record came out, Made in Europe, and I had heard Stormbringer and Lady Double Dealer off that. And then I look back and I go, wow, maybe Stormbringer's not a bad album, because I had heard that's not that good of a record. And I figured, well, these two songs are great. It must be.
Yeah.
So I found it used. I bought it. And the band was so tired on it. And you could totally tell exactly what you said about Richie Blackmore, Monty. I mean, you could hear that. You could hear he was unenthused. And just, you know, Highball Shooter was kind of a good song, but it just was, it had no energy. It was like this band was tired, done, and old. And it sounded like that, man. And there was no life to it, you know. And I just never, still to this day, could get into that album.
You're being a little hard on it, but I hear what you're saying.
I actually like the song Gypsy. I think that was kind of a cool little riff in that. But you were saying, Monty?
Wait, Gypsy's the one that goes...
Yeah,
that was a great one, but Soldier
That was a good
Fortune,
one.
I think, is definitely one of the underrated songs on that record.
Yeah.
And one of the Roadrunner bands, Opeth, just getting a little Roadrunner plug in here, did that song as a B-side. It was a special edition on the Close Reveries record. Pretty cool.
And, you know, I'm looking at the credits here, and I can see that Coverdale and Hughes are pretty much on almost every song on that record. And, in fact, there's songs that Blackmore's not even involved with, like Holy Man and others. So
Richie really likes Soldier of Fortune. He says that's one of his favorites on it.
let me start off, if you don't mind, Come Taste the Band.
Yeah, you never start off. I think, Martin, what do you say? Should we
Go
let
ahead.
him?
Go.
Is that okay? Do I get your permission?
You earned it.
Absolutely.
All right. Feel free to butt in any
Let's see if
time.
we can predict what he's going to say, though, Martin. Well, wait a minute. If he didn't like Stormbringer, there's no way he's going to like this.
Dude, I think Come Taste the Band, I will be safe to say, is probably my favorite Deep Purple record.
Oh, wow.
No joke.
We got to have some bloodshed here.
Well, look, In Rock and some of the others, obviously more classic. So on that end, I would probably say no. But as far as my most listened to Deep Purple record, and this is funny because, like I said, going back to the used records, I had never bought Come Taste the Band. And after Stormbringer, I looked at the album cover of Come Taste the Band. I'm thinking, you know, all the script writing on the back. I'm thinking, oh, God, this has got to be some AOR kind of record. I was a Blackmore fanatic, and everyone was disgraced the band when Tommy Bolin came in, you know. So I never got that record until after, you know, I was into Rainbow. Ended up finding that album used. I picked it up. I put it on, and it was the total opposite from Stormbringer. To me, it just brought in a whole new life. The album had like this renewed energy, I thought, with Tommy Bolin. I think it's some of Coverdale and Hughes' best work is working together. I mean, some of the songs they do together are just amazing. And still, I see a lot of people slagging this record, but I mean, Coming Home, Lady Luck, Getting Tighter, what a great riff. And Hughes does the lead vocals on that. Dealer, I Need Love, Drifter, every song on that record. I mean, I could throw that in my car.
You're selling me.
Go back and listen to it. I know Metal Blade reissued that record.
No, it is. Well, dude, it's definitely a hard rockin' record. It's solid. It's more focused and more cohesive than Stormbringer.
It's got an upbeat feel to it. It's just got a happy feel to it. You know?
I still prefer Stormbringer just because it's got Richie on it. It's got the heavy songs. But no, I definitely see merits in Come Taste the Band. It's a worthy record. It's, you know, especially considering Blackmore's not there, and it's like they pulled it off.
And I just think it's such a classy record. I mean, the songs are well written. Production, that was actually the first. I think Martin Birch was actually credited as just the sole producer. phenomenal. One of the best produced albums for its time. Absolutely. Everything just sounds so crystal clear on that. Just a great record. Musically, the band never sounded better, I think, on a studio record.
What do you think, Martin?
Well, I don't have a lot to say on this one, so I will be brief, but I actually do agree with both of you that it's definitely a solid record. It's a good sounding record. I think I'm not too crazy about just the pedestrian sort of real-world lyrics to it. I don't think it particularly sounds like a Deep Purple record, but I still really like it. There's a lot to go back to. It's got a lot of that who do we think we are thing where, you know, it's always a little bit of this enigma where you can go back and hear it fresh almost every time you play it. It's a heavy record. It's a good, solid record. You know, thinking about the history of growing up with it, I just always felt like it was just that downer one where the lineup is so fragmented that it's not really a Deep Purple record.
Yeah.
But
and then you know that, of course, they only lasted that one record, which also puts like a negative spin on it. You know?
Yeah.
How long after did Tommy Bolin pass after that record? Because I know they did that live. That live record was horrible that he did.
Yeah, because there was no guitars on it.
Yeah.
Oh, did we skip? I think we skipped Made in Europe, by the way.
Oh, we did. Yeah, that was my bad. Well, we'll finish this off and go back to Made in Europe.
I think Made in Europe had, 5 songs or 7 songs?
Yeah, 5 songs.
Yeah, typical Deep Purple, you know, but
yeah.
I don't mind Made in Europe.
I love the opening. It just goes into this crash and guitar, and then Coverdale just goes to the microphone, rock and roll, and then the riff of Burn starts. I just think that's classic. I remember first hearing that and going, wow, this is fucking cool.
If you like the Mark III lineup of Deep Purple, by the way, you've got to get the DVD from them and Cal Jam.
Oh, I've got that.
Amazing.
Yeah,
where I guess the gnats or whatever, or the flies are attacking David Coverdale the whole time.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Pretty cool.
I have much more patience for Made in Europe than Made in Japan because, yeah, it is 5 tracks, but it is, besides Mistreated, it's 5 rockers.
Absolutely.
You know?
Yeah. It's definitely a good album.
Yeah, I agree. I think, Stormbringer live, Lady Double Dealer live, musically, everything about that record. Coverdale sounds great on it. Great album, absolutely.
Yeah.
I do think, by the way, going back to Stormbringer, one issue I have with that record with the production is Coverdale sounds like he's singing with marbles in his mouth on that record. Like you just really don't hear the clarity in his voice, like you do on some of the other records. So whatever.
Yeah.
If you want to skip ahead to Perfect Strangers?
Perfect Strangers, 1984. So a good 10 years after their last studio record, Stormbringer. Well, I guess Come Taste a Band, that was 75. So Perfect Strangers, 1984. The band reunites with Ian Gillan and Roger Glover, the classic Mark II lineup. You want to start that off, Martin?
Yeah, I thought this was a great comeback. It did well for them. I think it went platinum pretty quickly. It's got some amazing songs on it. I mean, the classics are Perfect Strangers, very Zeppelin-esque or Deep Purple-esque, same kind of thing in certain ways. Blackmore-esque, I suppose. Knocking at Your Back Door with that amazing intro and just a good, groovy, heavy track. Everything on it is heavy except for one song, I believe, Wasted Sunsets, which I don't quite care for. I've heard a lot of people have very positive feelings for that song. I don't think it's a very good ballad. I don't think Deep Purple ever made good ballads. I have no patience.
Yeah, that's why I never cared for Anyone's Daughter or actually.
Yeah, but Hungry Days is a good funky hippie track, and I think the production is good on it. It's got a slight little bit of 80s cliches to it, but otherwise I think those guys are too smart, and I suppose they were too old by that point to fall to any major trends. But it is a good, competent production to it. It's just a good, eventful working man, meat and potatoes, participating in the world of hard rock kind of album.
Let's put it this way: it's a much more rewarding comeback record than Angels Retribution by Priest. That's for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but it's definitely. I agree with you, Martin. It's a solid record, and I think it's got 2 Deep Purple classics on it. Knocking at Your Back Door and Perfect Strangers are both like monster songs. There was monsters Deep Purple could make later in their career. Those were pretty much, in my opinion, 2 of the best songs that they ever made after the Reformation. I mean, maybe there was a couple of really strong ones on Perpendicular as well. We should probably find
Kiss too, eh? Think about A Gypsy's Kiss. I mean, that's a big, heavy metal epic, that one.
Yeah,
I haven't heard that in so long. That one's escaping me. You might be right about that.
That and another song you're forgetting is Under the Gun, which is an awesome tune. Very Gillan sounding, the band Gillan.
Yeah, totally agree.
Totally, and just a great tune. But I agree. I think it's one of the best comeback records. I think that and probably UFO's Walk on Water, which is a classic. Just 2 great comeback records, and you didn't know what to expect, really, from them coming back. And I thought they came back rather strong. And even, like you say, the popular songs, Perfect Strangers, which everyone compared the riff to Kashmir, which is somewhat similar, but, it's still got that Deep Purple feel to it, the whole song. Knocking at My Back Door, good song. But what I thought was so funny about it, in fact, reading your book about it, another thing, we got to mention something about Ian Gillan. It's just the cleverness of his lyrics and just the innuendos, the sexual innuendos. I think he was the master of it. Everyone says about, Steven Tyler or Bon Scott, who are all classic, and as well as Robert Plant, songs like the Lemon Song or whatnot. But Knocking at Your Back Door was a huge hit all over the radio, and it's a song about, fucking some chick in the ass.
Yeah. Oh, is it? I didn't know that.
I remember reading a quote about that in one of your books there, Martin. But just so clever of Ian Gillan. It's so typical of his style of lyrics. But
Ian and Roger, they're just attached at the hip, and they're both clever wordsmiths, and they sit there and do their crossword puzzles. They're just literary kind of guys.
Yeah, very clever lyrics on not just that song, but a lot of the songs. I
got to go back and re-listen to Knocking at Your Back Door.
But he also has this funny quality that I've also, I've talked about many times, this whole thing where he almost sounds like English from a foreign translation, or someone for which English is not his first language, or for someone whose, English is his first language, but he likes being very reckless with it.
Right.
He says a lot of things that you can tell he's kind of saying, that is on the verge of poetic and absurd. It kind of makes me laugh. I'll leave it in because
there's a lot of absurdity. And if you listen to a lot of Gillan stuff, a lot of kind of absurdity. Exactly. Laughing in Heaven, a lot of the songs on that. But very, very clever. But Deep Purple always had this certain coolness about them. And here in the States, which is funny, they were never that big. As far as, they're always known for, the Smoke on the Water, the hit songs. But they really were, I think, if not as classic, even more so than Zeppelin and Sabbath and all the great hard rock and metal bands out there. And they had a lot more respect in Europe. Still, I always laugh about it. You never see, anytime I see someone wearing a Deep Purple shirt, another band or something like that, I go, this is cool. This guy's got to be cool. This band's got to be cool. Deep Purple and UFO had that certain coolness about them where it was never overdone. You see people wearing a AC/DC shirt or Zeppelin. They bought it at Walmart or something. If you see a Deep Purple, there's something that's true about it. You know what I'm saying?
It's a good point. And just as a general point, the thing I like about that band, and Monty's probably going to disagree with me on this, maybe not, maybe it's only the very latest album he's down upon, but I actually believe that this is one of a handful of 5 treasured, cherished bands who are writing better music now than they ever did, in a way. Or at least maybe you'd grant me the supposition that they have this quality level that they really don't fall below too often, where Sabbath, they could fall right through the floor of the quality level, so could Priest. Zeppelin, we never really got to see what they could do because, they were truncated at 1980. But Deep Purple has proven time and time again, even when they're down and writing badly, they're writing better than most other bands.
That's something we're going to get into coming up here. Before we get into it, when I was talking about Deep Purple shirts, something reminded me real funny. This is I'd say mid-'90s. I was driving down Sunset Boulevard with a buddy of mine, and my buddy's like, dude, check this out. And I look over, there's this homeless guy wearing a Deep Purple shirt, and he's going, whoa, man, check it out. How cool is that? So we're driving, and we're thinking, you never see anyone wear a Deep Purple shirt. And we're thinking this guy was probably some old rocker from the 70s, did maybe one too many hits of acid, and we're going, dude, let's turn back around. Let's talk to the guy. Let's buy him lunch or something. He'd probably seen, Sabbath and Purple back in the day. And I remember seeing the shirt, and it was just totally ripped up and torn up. It looked like he wore it every day. And it was the shirt, Martin will probably remember this. You remember in Rock Tops and the back of Circus Magazine and Cream Magazine? Yeah. Mm-hmm. You probably remember this too, Monty. You would order those shirts for $4, and it was actually the shirt that had Tommy Bolin on it. And I'm going, I had that shirt once. I ordered that from Rock Tops. And I'm talking to my buddy, what did I do with that shirt? I can't remember. I said, fuck, I must have given it away.
Yeah.
And then it comes into my mind. I was living in Hollywood then. All my old clothes, rather than taking them to Salvation Army or whatever, there was a church right on Sunset Boulevard, and I would put a box of shirts and clothes there and just have them go through this. Now, mind you, when I did this was probably about 8 months before the sighting, and I'm thinking to myself, holy shit, That's my Deep Purple shirt he's wearing.
Yes, it was. Yeah, very good chance. To make a bit of a serious point that just sort of came to me, I mean, part of the reason you might not see Deep Purple shirts is that they never had a standard logo. Their album covers, they didn't seem to have a big head for merchandising, or they definitely don't think about merchandising first before everything else. They are real musicians. I don't know, maybe I'm giving them too much credit, but the fact of the matter is they really don't have a whole lot of recognizable stuff. They had that great Deep Purple logo that was on Stormbringer and Made in Europe, right? And that was great.
What about the big DP on the cover of Purple?
Yeah, that's
true.
Stupid.
I didn't like that either.
Yeah.
That was kind of like Judas Priest did that with the JP.
Yeah, right.
So, you want to go to...
Well, House of Blue Light, that was in 87, 3 years after Perfect Strangers.
I couldn't tell you one thing about that record. I couldn't name a song. I mean, it just...
Well, Bad Attitude was kind of a
hit. That it literally, I have no idea what it sounds like. And I know I've heard it at least a few times, so that should tell you what I feel about it.
It falls way short of Perfect Strangers. It wasn't a bad record, I don't think. We'll get Martin's take on it.
Well, okay. My take on this one is, I've had the guys tell me this many times, and it's become a Deep Purple cliche, how they say, our good records are always really easy to make, and we always follow it up with one that's really difficult to make, and we're all fighting blah, blah, blah. And they say that pattern has repeated itself a lot of times, and they've even said that in relation to Abandon after Perpendicular. I really compare Abandon to Perpendicular and this one to Perfect Strangers in a lot of the same ways. I think it's the same formula of the previous successful record, but they're trying much harder, recording better. The writing is maybe substandard a tiny bit, but because they seem to be trying harder, trying more things, adding a lot of engineering and layers, and just trying to make a more plush record and just putting this crazy effort into it, where the previous record was more just fueled on creativity and enthusiasm, I still think it comes out as a pretty solid record. I always liked House of Blue Light. I even went through phases where I thought House of Blue Light was even better than Perfect Strangers, because Perfect Strangers revealed itself as almost too simple to me. And I was hearing things in this one where I think ear candy, subtlety, layer. And it's a heavy record. It's like the plush, upscale cousin of Perfect Strangers, but maybe he's a little more boring.
Yeah, I don't think the songs are that strong. Yeah, I could say they're trying too hard. I mean, I thought Bad Attitude was a pretty cool song. Nothing mind-blowing on that. I mean, Unwritten Law was okay. It was Black and White was okay. Hard Loving Woman was all right, not nearly as good as Hard Loving Man. Then they had that Spanish Archer and Strange Ways with it. Fall way short. It kind of had that rainbowish kind of, trying to be a little bit Gates of Babylon-ish or whatever. But it just, I just didn't think it worked very well. A little bit too much AOR for me, I guess. So I guess Slave and Masters was the next in 1990, and that was when they brought in Joe Lynn Turner. We could just really touch on this one.
Joe Lynn Turner's my stomach.
Yeah.
I actually am a big Joe Lynn Turner fan, so I didn't really mean to joke on him, but I just couldn't resist. But
I don't think he belongs in Deep Purple. I mean, Joe Lynn Turner's a good vocalist, and it's not really him. It's just the songs on it. It was just a boring...
I was just excited by the change. Like, the whole idea of Joe Lynn Turner coming into Deep Purple was kind of cool. Again, this is a record I haven't come back to in many years. I just remember liking King of Dreams, and I remember having a more positive feeling about this record than House of Blue Light, but again, I haven't come back to it.
I actually got a lot of enjoyment out of this record. I know everybody kind of ragged on it, and it was definitely mellower than the previous two, which actually go on, a line. It's actually the most commercial Deep Purple record. Joe Lynn Turner will do that to you.
Sure.
But I actually quite like it. I've found a lot of enjoyment out of it, almost like in a guilty Judas Priest Turbo sort of way. I've gone back to this album lots and lots of times. The production is beautiful, very big and warm, whereas House of Blue Light was a little steely, Perfect Strangers was a little raw. This one is, getting back to that production thing, that why I like Machine Head. I just think this is very, very high-fidelity production. The playing is restrained on it. I think Richie and Joe are doing a little bit of that poppy, the beauty is in the spaces thing that they did on the last couple of Rainbow albums. I find it to be an underrated album, but again, I guess we're seeing by this point all of Purple's cards are being played. We know all their tricks. Maybe we're getting tired of a few of the tricks.
Right.
Good analysis.
Well, let's kind of combine the Steve Morse era. Steve Morse enters the picture, 1996.
Oh, we got one more, though, in there.
Oh, do we?
Battle rages on.
Oh, I forgot. That's right. I loved, this is the thing about Deep Purple. When that came out, I listened to the opening track and just going, fuck yeah, Deep Purple is back. I mean, that opening track just rips. I mean, what a great, classy opening number. Great song. And I was so excited. I'm thinking, this is going to be the greatest comeback, you know, even better than Perfect Strangers. This is exactly what they need. Listening to the album, my interest just fell and fell and fell and fell. And it's like, what did they do? It was such a great opening, and it just went down from there. And that's what I remember.
Enya stands out as one that's also pretty good. It's a good Zeppelin-esque, Blackmore-esque epic that actually, you know, was played live quite a bit. So there's really the two key songs in there, Battle Rages On and Enya.
I'll have to hear
I think we're all in agreement on this one.
Yeah.
I think I agree that it's quite poorly written. You can hear the tension. I know there was a lot of fighting over the lyrics on it. It's forced. It's a little bit kind of dark and crunchy and searching for a direction, and you just almost feel like the early 90s is not a time that Deep Purple should even be around.
Well, there was a lot of frictions. Of course, Ian Gillan comes back on this record, and it's a classic Mark II lineup once again. But there was a lot of friction between Richie and Ian. I know they actually had a fist fight. Now, was that after, to say before Slaves and Masters, or was that during this time when they had the infamous fight?
I really couldn't answer that, but there was a lot of friction for sure. This was that time when, I guess, how does the story go, that Richie just would not come back, and then he was just asked to name your price, and he just said $1 million, you know, like just something stupid off the top of his head, and they came back and said, okay, you can have $1 million. And then that's what really got him back in the band. So, yeah, it just seemed like, you know, that war was just getting too big to handle between the band, and just ripped them apart pretty quickly again.
And I don't think that record was very successful even in Europe, was it?
No, and it's got funny graphics that aren't very good, and yeah, the lyrics are kind of silly, and I don't know. Yeah, it's just not, doesn't really sound like them. And when it does sound like them on the songs that we kind of love, we also have to realize again, it's that point where their tricks are being played, and those tricks are fulfilling the wishes of the faithful, just like the song Stormbringer was. You know, I think, again, it's almost like throwing a bone to Richie. I believe David Coverdale even said something like that once, like, let Richie have his heavy song, or whatever. So you feel that going in. The cliches are there. It's acceptable that they're there. You kind of know they're there, but they're also pulling the wool over your eyes a little bit, but you are still happy to have those songs.
All right. This is where you guys are going to get into the big battle, and I really got to say I'm not very familiar with the Steve Morse era. I like a lot of the records, but let's just kind of clump in Perpendicular, Abandon, and Bananas. 96, 98, and then 2003 was Bananas.
One thing what I can say is I pretty much, as you can tell by how silent I've been over the last few records, I kind of started giving up on Deep Purple after the reunion record, the first one with Gillan,
Perfect Strangers.
So, you know, I really had no interest in hearing Perpendicular, especially after Richie, you know, was no longer involved. But I wound up getting into this record because I was approached by Bruce Payne at the time, their long-term manager. They were looking for a U.S. deal, and he sent me this record. So I had to hear, you know, I had to, like, kind of get into it to kind of give an answer. And I found myself surprised at how much I enjoyed the record. I think the song Sometimes I Feel Like Screaming, for me, is the best Deep Purple song with Morris ever written. I really like the song Ted the Mechanic, and I just remember thinking it was a really strong comeback record at the time, like, you know, it really had its fine points, much in the way that you were saying before about Come Taste the Band. And I actually wanted to put the record out. We wound up not being able to reach a deal with Bruce, and we didn't get it, but I thought it was a really strong record. But, of course, once again, after that record came out, I kind of lost interest in Deep Purple and didn't really hear anything until the very latest record. But I remember having great thoughts about Perpendicular, and again, thinking Sometimes I Feel Like Screaming is just a classic track.
Yeah, I actually think this is my favorite Deep Purple album of all time, and I love that track.
Even more so than in rock?
Yes, definitely.
Wow.
I just love the maturity of these guys writing. You know, they mention this in interviews where they say, look, we want to write as we are aging and write about the aging process, or just write as mature adults kind of thing. And I love the way they're doing that, and I think the Steve Morse almost is a parallel to that in the way he plays guitar. He's this quiet, smart guy who flies planes, who has this crazy past in all these different kinds of music, and here he is applying his chameleon energies to this band, and there's just this bravery of bringing in a guy like Steve Morse, who's from the south of America. You know, he doesn't even look like Deep Purple, and he just kind of really gets in there, and the band is just at this creative high where they're all just bouncing off of each other.
I agree. He sounds great with the studio.
I just love everything about this album. In fact, the Steve Morse era is my favorite era when I add it all up. When I see the band make 4 albums like that in a row, which I think are, you know, those 4 albums would probably be in my top 7 or 8 Deep Purple albums, with Perpendicular being the best. I love the production. I love the fact that the heaviness of the album just creeps up on you. It's almost like for the first time they're not writing heavy, but it still comes out heavy just because of the force of their personalities.
See, I got to really go back and listen to those records because it is really unfair for me, and it's not like me to do that. I remember listening to the records when they came out, but I think I'm like Monty. I just kind of lost an interest because, you know, the late 90s and early 2000s, there was so much bands you could choose from, and it just happens. You know, some of these old classic bands you just kind of lose interest in. I mean, same with even like a lot of the latter Sabbath records with Tony Martin. Not that they were all bad, but, you know, you listen to them once, a couple times, and you're kind of like, it's kind of the same stuff, but I do agree. See, when I saw the band live with Steve Morse, and I thought they were absolutely fantastic, I went back and listened to the records again, and I'm going, wow, you know, I never owned these records except for Perpendicular because they were so hard to come by. I don't even think Abandoned and Bananas were even released in the States, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I would think they would have been.
But, you know, the other thing is, you know, like I remember when Bananas came out, the album cover and the title was just awful. Was it like 2 Jamaicans or something, like on a banana truck?
This was shot in India.
And I love the weird, you know, I love hypnosis and that kind of stuff that has mystique to it. I don't know if that's what they were trying to do, but it was just stupid. It was lame.
Yeah.
But the album is actually great. I remember listening to Bananas and getting really into it. I go, wow, this is a really good record. And to bring back a lot of old Purple fans, people are going to be turned off right away by the title on the album cover. But I thought they made a lot of weird kind of decisions like that.
Well, the nice thing is that at this point they really are a progressive rock band, and that's what they bristle when they get called heavy metal. They don't mind being called a progressive rock band. They're almost like a jam band in a way, and they're writing jams into what they're doing. And they're a progressive rock band, but one of the heaviest kind. And almost at this point, they're just becoming nothing other than Deep Purple. They're almost like this pure essence of being a mature version of
I agree with you there. I do like that about it.
All 4 of these albums are very similar in that way. My least favorite of them is Bananas.
I will agree with you, Martin, that I think the band is the first time they all feel real comfortable. But I don't think they feel hungry at all. And that's the thing that's missing about Deep Purple. They feel comfortable, and you can tell they're kind of having fun with it and just kind of letting it flow.
Yeah.
But it doesn't have that kind of greatness that the earlier records did.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I want to reiterate that the thing that this has done for me, this era of Deep Purple, is vaulted Deep Purple into the status of practically my favorite band of all time. There are 3 bands, maybe 4 bands. Definitely, there's 2 bands that are now my favorite bands of all time, and that would be Deep Purple and ZZ Top for exactly the same reason. I just love the last bunch of albums. And, you know, all those ignored ZZ Top RCA albums, and I always talk about Rhythm and how great it is. I feel the same way about Deep Purple. It's like people are not really taking this that seriously, although Deep Purple has a thriving career, and it's obvious Steve Morse is a well-respected, well-loved guy in there. People don't really rag on Steve Morse. I think they just basically rag on the fact that Deep Purple might be past their due date and they shouldn't be making all these albums, blah, blah, blah. But
well, I think there's really no awareness, too. I mean, other than me, because, you know, I'm obviously a big fan of theirs, I'm aware of the records, but I've never seen them in the stores. I've never seen an advertisement for them here in the States. I haven't seen anything about them.
Yeah.
And unless you really search the Internet and stuff, you're not going to be aware of it. And what's the last album they did after Bananas?
Rapture of the Deep.
That's Monty's favorite album.
Which I love, and I'm finished. I've said my piece. We'll let Monty shoot his cannons.
All right.
One thing I will say about Rapture the Deep, because I did check that record out, and partly because I believe I saw Martin's review in Brave Words and Bloody Knuckles raving about it, but I will say that is a heavy record. I was surprised at how heavy it is. But just because it's heavy doesn't mean it's good. And I'm not into the songs. I think the production is so dry and crappy. Just does nothing for me. So, I don't know. I think that record's really overrated. And the only credit I will give it is that the band sounds heavy. And just,
I haven't even
in
heard
general,
that
I
record,
did
so I
like
can't even
Perpendicular, but to basically say Perpendicular beats in rock, dude, I don't know what to say. I don't know if I want to still be your friend.
Come on, get bloody.
No.
My thing on In Rock.
I can't hang with that. I
know what you mean, and I'll just say one quick point. I mean, I totally realize how massively important In Rock is, but I do have a real problem with production that is that screeching on the ear. I mean, that album, I almost put myself aside and say it is one of the greatest albums of all time, and it's a 10, and then I'm standing over here, now got to rate it on pure, enjoyment.
Well, I know exactly what you're saying. It was
listen to the new album, the production on that. It is so bone dry. It sounds like a demo. There's no production value to it.
It's definitely weird, yeah.
Yeah, really bad production on that. So, I don't know. I mean, on one hand, like I said, I got into Perpendicular. I found myself really enjoying it. I've never heard Abandon and Bananas. I did like Perpendicular, and maybe I'd like those records, but I did hear the recent record, and I couldn't stand it. And, to me, it's just not really Deep Purple anymore. That doesn't say that the band shouldn't have the right to release records and have fun and enjoy themselves. Absolutely. Why should anyone take that away from them? But for me, Deep Purple just kind of ended when Blackmore left. It just wasn't anything that I found interesting any longer. Even if when I did put those records on, I would enjoy them. Like I said, Perpendicular I thought was a great record. So maybe I'm selling those other records short. But
I got to go back and listen to them.
I just don't have a big desire to hear them. To me, it's not Deep Purple. So.
Well, I'm familiar with Perpendicular and a little bit Bananas, but the other two, Abandoned and Rapture of the Deep, I don't recall, so I can't make a comment. But kind of know what you're saying, Martin. It was like when I said about Come Taste the Band. My most listened to record, I listened to a lot more than In Rock recently because the production is so great on it. But yeah, pound for pound, I mean, the time In Rock came out, you can't argue that any Deep Purple record is probably better than In Rock because just for its time, it was a pure classic.
Definitely. And I want to recommend to you guys both go back and listen to Abandon, because Abandon to me again is just like that House of Blue Light thing, where it's that lineup trying way harder and writing trickier. It's progressive. It's recorded well. There's a lot of layers. It sounds like there's a lot of work in it, and I know the guys have said it was a difficult album to make. But I just think it's definitely a 10. It's just classic throughout. I'm also going to nod a little to Monty and say that Rapture the Deep has come down a little in my estimation. I would give Perpendicular a 10, Abandon a 10. I would give Bananas probably an 8. It's my least favorite of those because that one, when you do compare them, it has kind of a steely production, not a lot of bass to it. And I think there's some substandard songs on it. But yeah, these records are, I got to tell you, they're heavy. They're literary, and they're progressive.
I got to go back and listen to it, definitely.
Well, Rapture of the Deep is really heavy. I was shocked at how heavy it was, actually.
Wow.
Yeah, that I'll give you.
Well, I will say I do love Steve Morris. And I love the fact that when he came in, he wasn't trying to emulate Blackmore. He was kind of doing his thing. And it actually works, because I think when everyone heard that Steve Morris was doing Deep Purple, everyone was kind of like, huh? But I think he does a great job. And I think the band has matured in the way that they want to mature, which I appreciate. It wasn't like they're getting pressure from any labels or anything else. I think they're doing exactly what they want to do.
They're doing it for the right reasons.
Absolutely. And I applaud them for that. I just don't think, song for song, there's any particular song that just really...
Oh, you need to hear Sometimes I Feel Like Screaming on Perpendicular. That's pretty monumental.
Well, I was going to say, one that is very
again.
similar to that song, which is amazing on Abandon, is Watching the Sky. You got to try that one out.
I will definitely do that. In fact, I'm going to go online right now and go up to iTunes and see if I could get them off there.
There you go. Support the music business. Buy it legally.
Exactly.
Bob, you should just go to a record store out there in Northern California.
I don't see any those latter albums.
On Amazon.com. Support physical products.
I will do that. I will go to Amazon.
You do it for the birds. No, I'm just kidding.
All right. Well, dude, that was fun. It didn't even get... I think we all kind of will leave without any wounds. Cool.
So just let it be said for the record. I tried very hard to be nice on this one because, Martin, you definitely got me with a few things, but...
No, you've
decided
convinced
to
me
be
of some
nice.
things, too.
Right. But we should kind of say maybe a little bit about the DVDs or live stuff.
So much shit comes out, it's I've lost track.
I always ascribe like a bit of pomposity to a band when they put out way too much live product, and that kind of is bothering me a little bit about Deep Purple. I know it's probably not exactly them personally saying, let's put out another live album, because these things seem to come from all over the place.
Well, it's like Iron Maiden even, or even, newer
Yeah,
bands doing
I
that,
just
too.
don't like it. I just find it pompous, like, we're supposed to want these things, and I definitely don't. And Deep Purple's getting out of control. I mean, yeah, Maiden, Rush, I mean, it happens a lot, but Deep Purple has this extra layer where I know they kind of know how good they are. You know what I mean? They do consider themselves this great, you could call them a blues band, and they'd probably say, yes, that's what we are, or a progressive band, or a jam band, but don't call them a heavy metal band. And,
Or
all
I don't think they like being called a classic rock band either.
Yeah, oh,
Dylan
definitely
got bent
not.
out of shape on the last record with that.
Yeah, exactly. And again, none of us like the long extended jam stuff. Nobody probably ever liked that stuff. And it's funny though, reading their interviews, they always talk about how the crowd was just getting off on it, and we went into this 20-minute thing and no one wanted it to end. And it's like, dude, believe me, everybody wanted it to end.
Yes.
But Deep Purple's really not really like that anymore. I mean, when you go see them live, they are definitely just slinging the songs. They're doing a great job.
Well, they're too old to jam. They don't have the energy.
Yeah.
No, last time I saw them live, granted, it was quite a few years ago. They kicked ass, man. I mean, they still, they weren't moving around like they used to, but, I mean, they sounded great.
And what's good, too, is these days they're actually bringing in some old classics that they never played with Blackmore, like Fireball and, all kinds of cool shit.
True.
Like, surprising songs.
Yeah, Pictures of Home they'll do, and a lot of stuff they haven't done. But, I got to say, another reason why I'm kind of discouraged about the latter records, because I, like you guys, were such a huge Gillan fan, and I think those were some of the greatest records. I mean, those were just amazing records. Mr. Universe, Future Shock.
Well, there you go. What a great discussion that was. The great Deep Purple debate with Monte Conner and Martin Popoff. Once again, if you want to contact Martin Popoff or check out his books that he does have available, he does have them available online. You could go to his website at martinpopoff.com. That's MartinPopoff.com. Martin will be featured in several future Shockwaves Skull Session podcasts, as will Monty. In fact, as I mentioned, we've got an upcoming Kiss debate with Monte Conner and Marty Friedman. That'll be coming up real soon. Also, just to let you guys know, we will be posting the Shockwaves Skull Session much more frequently than we do the Shockwaves Hard Radio podcast. So a lot of people ask about that. We will be posting them to begin with weekly. So keep coming back to the website or to iTunes to check on future episodes. Once again, support both podcasts. You could go to the Shockwaves Hard Radio podcast at hardradio.com. The latest episode features Hell Yeah Mudvayne vocalist Chad Gray and Wasted vocalist Finn. I am going to be getting to some music episodes, some independent metal music podcasts on the Shockwaves Hard Radio podcast. And of course, on this podcast, the Shockwaves Skull Session, we will be featuring several great debates and discussions, and we will be posting them up weekly. So some great stuff ahead. Once again, man, you can contact me at my personal email address at shockwaveskullsession@gmail.com. So hit me up. Give me your thoughts on this episode, and for more information, once again, go to roadrunnerrecords.com, and also check us out on iTunes. Go to iTunes and just type in Shockwave Skull Session and subscribe. For those of you not familiar with how to subscribe to podcasts on iTunes, it's a real convenient thing. When you go to the iTunes store and type in Shockwave Skull Session, hit the subscribe button, and every future episode will automatically be downloaded onto your computer, so you will get every episode of the Shockwave Skull Session. So with that said, let's go ahead and end our debut episode. I am Bob Nalbandian, your host, signing off.